I'll wait. Oh, now you can hear me, right? Good afternoon and welcome to the 2025 annual AWP Conference and Book Fair in Los Angeles. I am Mimi Herman, a member of the AWP Board of Directors. Here is a visual description of myself. I have dark and silver hair. I am wearing a black turtleneck and a long black vest with embroidery and Mardi Gras beads. And this really cool badge that says AWP. Anybody else have one of those? Good, okay. The Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the academic programs and organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I'm a member of the AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP. Membership with AWP provides me with writing resources year-round, but just as importantly, it allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out. My membership dues help writers find meaningful careers and publication opportunities and make services like the Writer-to-Writer Mentorship Program possible. If you aren't already, I invite you to become a member today. We are delighted to bring you this event today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our conference sponsors and literary partners hosting this event, thank the Jewish Book Council who are hosting this event. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to produce extraordinary events and help us keep our conference affordable and accessible. Please join me in thanking all of our conference sponsors and partners for their support and participation. Now, before we start, I need to do some brief housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones. Remember, there is no flash photography allowed during the presentation. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. And please give the authors 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed. And since I'm directionally challenged, I'm going to give you directions for the book signing because it's a little tricky. You'll go out, you'll turn left, you'll pass the book buying table and buy lots and lots of books, and then you'll go further down the hall toward Groundwork Coffee, and in a little alcove you will find these fabulous writers who will all be ready to sign your books. Thank you, and now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Maya Pindyck, who will introduce this fantastic event. Thank you. Maya.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Jewish Book Award Reading and Conversation. And thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your presence. We would like to begin again by thanking the Jewish Book Council for sponsoring this reading and for all the work that you do to create and nurture literary communities for exploration of Jewish life, culture, and identity. We want to give a big shout out especially to Naomi, Miri, Becca, and Simona for all your work and support coordinating this event. And we would also like to begin by acknowledging that we enter this room in community with all of you. We enter this community as Jewish poets, sharing from books that have won or been finalists for the National Jewish Book Award in Poetry, as well as some more recent poems. The term Jewish poets, of course, is pluralistic, diasporic, and filled with contradictions. It can include religion, secularism, spirituality, history, politics, immigration, intergenerational trauma, humor, culture, bagels, neuroses, and a call to justice. Judaism has always contained multitudes. And as you'll hear today, our work speaks to a range of experiences, viewpoints, and subjects, shared and diverging. Collectively, we value poetry for its embrace of nuance, uncertainty, restlessness, courage, and imagination. We look forward to seeing what connections and frictions emerge between and among our poems and in the conversation to follow among us, and then hopefully with all of you. I'm going to go ahead and read everybody's bios ahead of time so as not to interrupt the reading. Each of us will read for around 7 to 8 minutes, and then we're going to transition to the conversation portion of the event. So we're going to begin with Michael Dumanis. Michael Dumanis is the author of Creature, Four-Way Books 2023, a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award, the Big Other Book Award, and the Vermont Book Award, and My Soviet Union, University of Massachusetts Press, 2007, winner of the Juniper Prize for Poetry. Yes. A refugee from the former Soviet Union, he came to the US in 1981 with his family. He teaches at Bennington College and serves as editor of Bennington Review. Jared Harél. Jared Harrell's second poetry collection, Let Our Bodies Change the Subject, University of Nebraska Press, 2023, was selected by Kwame Dawes as the winner of the Prairie Schooner Roz Shoemaker Book Prize in Poetry, and was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award and the Patterson Poetry Prize. Jared teaches creative writing at Manhattanville University, plays the drums, and lives with his family in Westchester, New York. Carlie Hoffman is the author of 3 poetry collections, including When There Was Light, Four-Way Books 2023, winner of the 2023 National Jewish Book Award, and the just-released One More World Like This World, Four-Way Books 2025. She is the translator from the German of the Jewish German language poets Selma Mirbaum-Eisinger's Blutenles, World Poetry Books 2026, and the essential poems of Rose Auslander's forthcoming with Four-Way Books. Erika Meitner is the author of 6 books of poems, including Holy Moly Carry Me, Boa Editions 2018, which won the 2018 National Jewish Book Award and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Useful Junk, Boa Editions 2022. She is a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she directs the MFA program and runs the Connie Project on Jewish Arts. Maya Pindyck's 3rd book of poems, Impossible Belonging, Anhinga Press, 2023, won the Philip Levine Prize for Poetry and was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. With Ruth Vins, she co-authored the educational resource, A Poetry Pedagogy for Teachers, Bloomsbury, 2022. She teaches in the Creative and Critical Studies Department at Moore College of Art and Design. So, without further ado, I will pass the mic to Michael.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of this community. I'm going to read a quick, short poem from my book and then 2 new poems. And I just want to say that I feel like from what Maya read, I just think that increasingly, for whatever reason, the older I get, the reality of being an immigrant to this country as a child, being born in the former Soviet Union, a country that no longer exists, and of being Jewish is increasingly central to just my thinking about writing in general, and I think it's implicit in the poems I'm going to read. The Anxious Journey. Before I boarded, I gorged myself on banana and pineapple, folded and unfolded my softest gloves, ran a hard comb through the sweat of my hair, kissed my mother on the forehead, kissed my son on the nose, kissed my wife on the neck, held myself in my arms, kissed the conductor on the mouth, thinking that a difference could be made. And then I boarded the strange train, and the reassuring moan of the locomotive made me think of the Canada geese I pelted with bread, the warm fact of them, made me for a moment forget the journey I spent my life readying for, though I still, as the train thundered off, as my fingers wrapped gently on the darkening window of my final thought, saw the whole map fan out before me, inexorable, flat. Okay. Thank you. The truth. Nobody tells the truth. When my mother stopped dying of cancer, I asked her what kept her going. I had been having trouble keeping going. There was a devastating hamster inside my skull gnawing the wires. She told me she hasn't discovered anything about meaning, except that sunlight feels pleasant streaming as it does into her face when she sits on a porch swing, the way it throws long shadows from every squat building, and that she finds the manifold textures of green reassuring when they overwhelm the stand of quaking aspen and paint over the clearing. And also the low sky made of tissue paper in the first hours of waking, and the infinite sky with a single bird crossing its life over hers, as well as the intimations of evening, the sun bursting its contours, a gentle fire spreading over the parking lots and tennis courts dotting the greater Rochester area, the yawning supermarkets and swimming pools, filling my mother with an insatiable longing to witness it from scratch all over again on the following square of the calendar. Years later, nodding daily through the squat screen of my iPad at her nodding head, I struggle imagining that these fogged eyes, sunken acutely into her skin's proliferating crevices, once belonged to a third grader wearing white pinafore over a scratchy brown dress every morning, red ribbon in her hair and another at her neck, a dribble of ink blotting one sleeve that frostbitten spring after the Communist Party's 20th Congress. She was tearing in a row of classmates Stalin's photographs out of the textbooks, blackening out with a broad-tipped pen his name, purging the inconvenient history, leaving Lenin on his lonesome by splitting in two the picture where they sat together scowling while her teacher looked vacantly at the clock and ceiling. But don't expect the truth from any story. According to my mother, she fetishized books too much to be breaking their pages like this, and besides did not understand what was happening, only that her classmates were defiling their readers with an industrious glee, dropping Stalin face down on the floor, his walrus mustache already missing from the wall where it had once greeted them scowling. Their teacher letting her pupils carry on as though this was nothing of consequence, dodgeball at recess. Judging by a 1956 issue of Time, it could only have happened the following autumn, the Pravda newspaper for months suppressing the skinny on the secret denunciation, aiming to soften the whiplash. My mother went running to her father, asking him to explain the scene of collective erasing, believing still in a father who understood everything. Her last memory of him was 5 years later, seeing in the antiseptic ward a black necklace of leeches drawing blood from his comatose form. It is impossible to stop thinking about leeches applied to the neck of a father. Since emigrating, she has not thought for even an hour returning to Erika on the brown Klyazma River, her formerly thriving hometown, with its monumental cotton and chintz manufacturing syndicate, proud source of Soviet silk and wool, of pinafores for miniature pioneers adjusting with their persistent dimpled hands the past to suit the present until the shuddering of hapless mills. As mother, she seldom shared what she was thinking, staying mum about God, refusing to take my grim father to task for his quicksilver violences. I am unwilling to say too much more about that, having committed to cutting his face out of each page of the book of my upbringing. To her, it's ludicrous that I'm still litigating a prior century's offenses, conflating past tense with gerund. My well-meaning mother spent my adulthood rewriting my adolescence, rehabilitating and absolving, selectively forgetting. Who can say at this point who has manufactured the less inconsistent retelling? I'm going to read one more poem. Obad. One of the children is already mumbling a tonal birdsong through the plaster sorting us. He can be counted on like the impatient light my eyes adjust to as I start to stretch my arm out toward the phone I sleep beside, as the unmemorable dream gives way to doubt, to figure out what's brewing and what's clear today that wasn't at midnight. Soon enough, I will be subjected to a barrage of impositions in various architectural spaces. For now, the routine train hauls talc and limestone past my yard's rear boundary, granite and marble, heating oil. This could be a dawn in 1939 for all the boxcar knows. It can be trusted to follow for eternity the indefatigable track until time decommissions either one. All of the Nazis looked cute in their black and white baby pics. They must have liked the seesaw just as much. Their patient mothers, scraping mud from their corduroys, kept coming up with new terms of endearment. But isn't that over? So why cycle back to it, rereading each tome in the circular library? Still, I hang on like an unsightly icicle from a serene, austere, half-timbered roof. All of the Nazis have stopped playing pinochle. Poof, they evaporate, much like the rest of us. All of the sightseers on Alexanderplatz now spend their Sundays applauding the breakdancers. However, it's likely we may have continued to overestimate the goodness in people. When Laocoon tried to warn the Trojans, the serpents swam out of the waves and swarmed him, while elegant young denizens of the walled city, aspiring philanthropists and dealers in silk, content producers and social engineers, their futures unrolling before them like star maps, stood back, looked on, and then began to jeer. There comes a recrudescence, a secondary fit, what you might call the echo of the gout. Once more, the blister glistens through the skin. Halfway between the wars, the powers struck a deal banning all war for good. Frank Kellogg, Calvin Coolidge's Secretary of State, a former Minnesota scamp in knee pants and matching waistcoat, who wrapped rocks in yarn to make himself a ball, received the Nobel Peace Prize for the peace pact that bears his name. Haven't you heard? Frank is the reason there are no more wars. The etymology of recrudescence, flesh turning raw again, a breaking out afresh, is crudus, rough, not cooked, akin to crudel, source of modern cruelty, meaning unfeeling, hard-hearted, rude, inclined to make another suffer, attended by distress, disposed to inflict pain. Crudus and crudel, the awkward twin offspring of the same Proto-Indo-European root. In Sanskrit, cura, raw, bloody. In Greek, creus, flesh. In Latin, cruor, thick blood. In Middle Irish, cruade, as in hardy, stern. Blood in contemporary Russian, krov. Blood in Ukrainian is krov. In Old English, hreya is raw, and hot, thick fluid, a serum. Therefore, recrudescence, a crude, cruel, cruddy, and inexorable comeback, always inevitable, rarely foreseen. What I foresee is that my son needs toothpaste and breakfast, a brush through thick hair, concealer for a miniature scar. When the new toll road was open to traffic, everyone clamored to be the first person to drive it. It calms and frightens me that I won't know the contours of each day after I go. The button I press causes the blinds to lift. I move my head in several directions. As far as I can tell, there is no sun. A sepia sky hovers over the village. Ladders surround the house across the way. 2 workmen have already reached the roof. It's hard for me to know what I am witnessing, a creation or a dismantling. Thank you.
Hey friends, how are we doing? I'm going to read 3 poems for you all. The first poem I wrote when my son was just a few weeks old, and it is anchored by 3 things. One is a bris, which is a ceremonial circumcision 8 days after a Jewish boy is born. Also the biblical tale of Abraham. And the third thing is a 1960s pop song that you may recognize. Also, I was super sleep deprived when I wrote this poem because we had a newborn, and I still don't fully understand the title. But maybe it fits. It's called Meditation in the Key of an Exhale. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, says my son at his bris. Though it's my party and I carry the weight of 100 generations on the tip of my penis might be more apt. Or, it's my party, let us pray. The truth is, it isn't a party in my family until somebody cries or storms off in shame, barricading themselves in the opposite sex restroom, while my son, for what it's worth, hardly cried at all at the critical juncture, just sucked the wine-soaked rag between his gums, the way Abraham bit the branch of a thick-knuckled olive tree when he snipped himself, joining a club he was the sole member of, Party of One. Is it still my party? Asks my son, slumped in the pocket of my elbow. He looks just like his sonogram ghost on the fridge. My lips, my wife's nose, and who knows whose chin. It's my poetry, and I promise not to cry when I read this to him. How the instant I saw him, I thought he was dead. A silence so wide, I stage dived into it. Was it the winter in his eyes, that umbilical noose so close to his neck? It's my party, and I predicted a smaller turnout, less guests. I expected to be alone. But here he is, plump as a blood plum, a part of it now, somehow my son. So when the ceremony is over and everyone is gone, I snap him into the car seat, tighten the straps, and holy hell, my heart is in my throat. Thank you. So my collection, Let Our Bodies Change the Subject, it's knee-deep in parenthood, and this is one of the first poems from that collection. It features both my kids, to their tremendous delight. We'll see if that continues into their teenage years. And it has a tiny bit of singing in it, for which I apologize in advance. It's called All I've Ever Wanted. The almond milk has turned. Flecks of foul snow slink in slow liquid. Not the discovery I had angled for this morning, but as my dad likes to sing like some Jewish Mick Jagger, you can't always get what you want. Which is just what I croon to my two children, driving them up the wall, because of course all they want is to get what they want. A fifth scoop of gelato, to play Minecraft till their eyeballs pixelate in their skulls. What humbling work to haul kids toward thoughtful, the kind in humankind like a foreign language on a stubborn tongue. Yet even as a toddler, my son would refuse a lollipop if his sister didn't get one, still plucks an extra sticker to gift her after school. And hell, my daughter can't ride an elevator without making a new friend or some lady's day by praising her earrings, her sweater, or purse. My point about discovery has escaped me by now, though I know the old chorus for thwarted desire. My cereal will be dry, coffee taken black. I will try against hope to be better than myself, which is all I've ever wanted and everything I need. Thank you. The last poem I'm going to read is the title poem for the collection. I wrote it on the heels of yet another mass shooting in the country. It owes a great deal to a conversation I had with my wife that evening. And it also kind of plays on one of the themes of the collection, which is this sort of the obligation to look and bear witness, and also the impulse to sort of look away. Yeah, it's called Let Our Bodies Change the Subject. In the kitchen, with the kids finally asleep and news of another shooting in the space between us, you confess you think death might feel like giving birth, the body insistent, having its way. You say you'd never been so at the mercy of yourself as you were on that bed in that cloud-thin gown, and just the knowing it was coming. Ruthless transformation. I have no good response to ruthless transformation, and so it hangs there above a bowl of tortilla chips and black bean salsa we've decided will be dinner. It lingers while a reporter frames chaos as developments, her shoulders rinsed in darkness and revolving red lights. I want to kiss you. build asylum inside you, let our bodies change the subject, the channel to cartoons. Before night pulls away down the flickering interstate, I want one ruined thing utterly redeemed, a death toll rescinded, a swastika removed, my uncle's melanoma caught early enough to cut, a beige Band-Aid halfway down his calf. It had looked, my aunt said, like little more than an ink spot. I didn't get nervous till it didn't wash out. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carlie Hoffman. It's nice to be here. I'll read a poem from my book, When There Was Light, which won the National Jewish Book Award. And it explores women's historical exclusion from the canon of Kabbalah. Kabbalah for last November. This is the afternoon the women dance on the grassy hill, unclothed and untethered as the wolves of Belarus, before the word for water appears like a seed of the aftermath, before the lesson of numbers darkens. One woman stretches her shining torso into the weather, extends the reach of her palm, safe for a second from the dead of winter, revealing its prophecy in the almond tree. Another falls backward into matte blue sky. You can't see her face, can't distinguish pain from healing. You have dragged your chair up here to learn desire in the movement of muscles bulbous beneath skin. Each woman, her own unholy architecture, hair blooming wild behind her. You have always been the woman in the flooding room, refusing to move out of the way. In my new collection, which just came out this month, One More World Like This World, I explore the timelessness of female oppression. And in this next poem, I'm thinking about Rose Auslander, the poet I translate, and I blend scholarship from my translations into the poem. And it's also a response to the Supreme Court overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022. It's called Rose Auslander, Jane Roe, and Me. Much remains to be said, though our garden lies buried in the cemetery. I bring stones from the gate of the cities made invisible and count backward. There is my friend C, bleeding in the parking lot of the high school during 6th period earth science class as we crowd the window, her blonde hair flickering like wind-caught snow. The teacher vanishing down the hall, snow dissolving Jane's body on the pavement. How, as girls, no one told us what was happening, not with words, but we felt the sirens as a kind of voice. How we even survive the danger of roses. Then a stone in the lake, an arbitrary number, the news on the television where my turning takes place. A wall of round names and lips, one clock after another, babbling the litany. How I have no place, but this small oracle, ash from the synagogues, a gust of wind ruffling the sheaves of paper. And in my final poem, I'm thinking about how important the inner lives of women really are and our coming of age, and how my Jewishness, which relates to my belief that books and language can change lives, is worth writing about in a poem. Reading Virginia Woolf in a Women in Literature class at Bergen Community College. I know it's October because I wear shoes without socks. The air is good to me, and I sweat less through my shirts. Entire days of trees on campus, of stray geese crowding the grass near the traffic circle like groupies, as if the honking cars were a rock band. It's October and Keith, my high school crush, waves from the back of the classroom. I have no idea why he's here, the radiator hissing at his back, except the cliche of boys who always return from where they've left, like Odysseus, but less plagued by spring and the sea, the misunderstanding of his nature. But I never asked him, and now something inside me shifts off balance, even though my stomach's been twisted for hours. But I'm so hopped up on coffee and Midol that I have no point of view. And the afternoon becomes a mood tilting toward Keith, like shifting weight from one foot to the other. He is obnoxiously here, and he slept with my older sister. I am just now remembering, though this was a few years ago and long after the day I'd tagged along to go apple picking, dirt from the groves still in my nails late at night, when my sister asked me if I'd ever kissed anyone. I was just beginning freshman year, working to get my time down for swim team, where I spent the summer ditching birthdays and the ice cream truck's persuasive tune, to practice the butterfly and freestyle and learning to dive less crooked, which was going as well as expected until Andrew sat next to me on the bus ride home from the pool during tryouts, his chlorine-dried hand on my shoulder a little too long without asking when he asked my name, and "He has a crush on you," said my friend Becca while faking a gagging sound in her throat. I said yes, even though I hadn't kissed anyone. And maybe this was my first true poem, lying to my sister in support of love, stealing imagery from the books I'd read in the library to avoid the cafeteria. A girl at camp gets fingered in the lake. A girl goes missing and is happy being gone, a little grateful even. Even before Shakespeare and Lavinia, Ovid and Philomela, I believed dead girls lived eternally as trees, and on bad weather nights, their leaves flew into the gutters, choking the rain pipes. Fishing boats against the moon, wrote Woolf on grief. Giant artichokes towered among roses. The world can be the saddest fish tank. In the orchard, my sister throws an apple at me, then flirts with Keith. In class, his arm means nothing, as I study admiration, glancing at the girl 3 desks ahead who I had seen at parties, the kind where all the boys wear V-necks with tight jeans and play music in bands, smoke weed in the kitchen, controlling the music, yelling lyrics into a kind of oblivion, spilling beer on whoever they've grabbed to dance, while I watch her from my spot against the fridge as she lights a cigarette and is effortlessly cool in her black tuxedo vest, taking a break from university but keeping up on credits. She gets invited to the Stone Pony in Asbury Park on weeknights to listen to the boys play their out-of-tune guitars, and she already read The Bell Jar, she tells our professor, who adjusts the volume for the projector, and I'm writing in my notebook, "Read The Bell Jar." We have just finished a unit on poetry and are moving on to prose. The professor shuts the lights, and a woman stands dead center on a spotlit stage without an audience, because it would have been impossible, she says, for a woman to have written the plays of Shakespeare in the age Shakespeare had written. I write this down in my notebook because Judith could not. And the girl from the party, who has already read The Bell Jar, is staring out the window while Keith rests his hand in the warmth of his palm. And Andrew rides the bus to the swim meet where I didn't make the cut. And Becca has just found out I had sex before her, and she's calling me a slut. And my sister sinks her teeth into the apple, and the geese applaud from the lawn. And the professor does not teach us that 7 days before Wolfe marries, she finishes this novel, and in October reads it over to decide whether it is to go straight into hell. Thank you.
Hi, friends. Hey. I'm a little short. So I'm going to read 2 poems today. The poems I'm going to read were written in the summers of 2018 and 2023. They came out of a different cultural and political context than I find myself in today as a Jewish American poet. In this particular moment, the current administration is using the memory of the Holocaust and what they define as anti-Semitism as a pretext to dissemble and defund higher education, curtail constitutionally protected free speech and the right to assemble, and disappear lawful US residents affiliated with universities who advocate for Palestinian human rights and freedom, like Mahmoud Khalil and just yesterday, Rumeysa Azaturk. As the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, as an MFA program director at a major research university on Trump's hit list, as a Jewish studies faculty affiliate who runs a Jewish arts project at the same institution, I want to be clear that I offer these poems to you, the audience, with the belief that the only safety we have is through solidarity with others, and not via persecution, repression, and threat. 2 poems. This one, the only thing you need to know is the last word is bleating, like a sheep, not bleeding out from a wound. And I lived in Southern Virginia, Appalachia for 15 years. Light-sensitive puzzle piece. At the protest where everyone was outraged about children in cages, a guy who looked vaguely like Jesus was holding a Keep Families Together sign, and a woman who wanted to speak was holding a megaphone, then said, "I've never used one of these things. How does it work?" And her friend with the love thy neighbor, no exception sign said, "Hold it closer to your mouth," and she did. And while she was speaking, pickups drove by with enormous Trump flags. Pickups drove by blasting aggressive country, God bless the USA. And I couldn't stop looking at protest Jesus's work boots, his cut-off homemade tank top. I was holding a sign sharpied on the back of a pizza box from 4 protests ago that said "Child of a Refugee," with a red arrow pointing to me. And I stood near 3 women with small cages for rabbits, birds, gerbils, that each held dolls. One was a Cabbage Patch Kid with blonde braids, since protest as mixed media sculpture is a thing now, even in Appalachia. And there was a toddler wearing a Superman shirt, holding a rainbow Superman was a refugee poster, and his father was holding him on his shoulders. Some nights when it was late and my sons were small and asleep in their beds, I'd turn off all the lights in the house, and suddenly the sound of a train or cow or cricket, something moving and alive from their puzzles, would speak when you shifted a piece off or put one back on. This inanimate thing made animate by light would utter ghost sounds. The reporter from the local paper asked me why I was there on the sidewalk. So I told her about my mother and the DP camps. I told her only a small part of the story, but she still looked shocked. To hold is to bear the weight of a person or thing, to grasp or carry or support with our arms, to embrace someone, to keep or detain someone. There's the hold of a ship or remaining secure and intact in a position, to maintain a connection until the person on the phone line is free to speak, to have in your possession the act of grasping something, a degree of power or control. The last Shoah survivors are nearly gone, so they've made holograms to tell their stories to school children and museum visitors, but it's not the same. We respond to the sound of an actual human voice attached to a body, which means when the next woman with the megaphone in an ecumenical collar starts to read the last 4 lines of Emma Lazarus's The New Colossus, there's not a dry eye on the sidewalk in front of our local congressional office. The congressman who is away, The congressman who got teary, who looked me in the eye and said that kind of persecution could only happen in Germany, when I told him my family story. Refugee from Fujio, to flee or escape from this to that. Our meeting was a season before neo-Nazis marched through Charlottesville, and the rabbis pulled the Torah scrolls from the building, and someone was killed, and I began quizzing my sons on our full names, addresses, phone numbers. Superman, born Kal-El on the planet Krypton, was rocketed to Earth by his father, unaccompanied, alone as an infant, moments before the destruction of his planet. And it was months before anger turned to panic, then to fear. And here we are, the dislodged pieces, shoulder to shoulder, light sensitive, and bleeding into the deep night. And this next one, shout out to the National Park Service Rangers for this one. Manifesto of Fragility, Terraform. In the Grand Tetons on the shores of Jenny Lake, a ranger is giving a talk. You can gently feel and bond with the lichen. She is stroking the side of a tree trunk. The little things in our ecosystem, she says. And these days, our ecosystem is basically a Yiddish resistance song. Mir werden sie überleben, we will outlive them. Since there are critically endangered orcas harassing ships, biting at rudders, and even sinking yachts off the Iberian coast. Scientists shun the word attack for these encounters, claim it's not aggression, but most likely the killer whales playing, finding pleasure, like the female sea otter in Santa Cruz accosting surfers, committing longboard larceny. The otter was shredding, caught a couple of nice waves, said a 16-year-old dude, whose board was commandeered by the otter at Cowell's Beach. Multiple attempts have been made to capture her, none successful. And in the Netherlands, magpies and crows are turning hostile architecture into homes, constructing cyberpunk nests from anti-bird spikes, strips of sharp metal pins meant to keep them from perching on buildings. I'm definitely rooting for the birds. They're fighting back a bit, said the Dutch biologist studying the phenomenon. Never mind the record wildfire season in Canada that made the weather forecast on my phone, no matter what state I was in, just smoke. The unprecedented heat domes across the US all summer. The ocean in Miami at 100 degrees, sparking coral reef bleaching and a massive die-off. Before we went out west, every night I walked a path around Tiedeman's Pond, getting dive-bombed by red-winged blackbirds, which is so common during nesting season. The local paper offers advice. Make eye contact, run for cover, wear a hat or a bike helmet when you go out on foot. The ranger is still talking about lichen. They colonize harsh environments, infiltrate and wedge apart pieces of rock, serve as food in times of stress for mammals, including humans. Birds use lichen for nest building. Lichen are possibly the oldest living things on Earth. We will outlive them. Mir werden sie überleben. The Jews who made up that resistance song on the spot were Polish, murdered by the SS in Lublin in 1939, ordered to sing to their own execution. They all died against barbed wire, but their song lived on. And in the prairie restoration area, despite the drought, despite the shrinking footprint of the pond, the ground is still bursting with a riot of purple and yellow and white, cup plants, plume thistle, bee balms, and bergamots. Resistance is a struggle against impossible circumstance, refusal, the will to survive in the face of annihilation. It can also be the surviving remnant exacting revenge. The dictionary offers sample sentences. They have shown a stubborn resistance to change. Government forces were unable to crush the resistance. The troops met heavy resistance as they approached the city. He went underground and joined the resistance. In the story about the Jews of Lublin, No one sang until one person began. Thank you.
Thank you. Before this reading, Erika and I shared our introductions to our poems, and we realized we had almost the same statement. So I want to thank you, Erika, for saying that. I'm not going to repeat that, even though it bears repeating. But I want to say that also in thinking about the poems that I'm going to share from Impossible Belonging, were written in a different time, but also in response to an ongoing occupation that hasn't changed, but has becoming more and more horrific. And I'm thinking about how these poems in this book are interfacing with our current moment. It's a book called Impossible Belonging, and the poems are about the ways that we belong and fail to belong to our culture, to our community, to our history, to our body, to ideology, and in many ways to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and read 3 poems from this collection, Impossible Belonging. And I just want to say what a gift and honor it is to read alongside such amazing poets, Erika, Carlie, Jared, and Michael. And thank you again to the Jewish Book Council for having us. Boy. Someone made the school a plaque of names. I find the one I wanted for my never son, bronze prince, stirring a pond with all his brothers. My family came here from a country I am not allowed to visit, even though its spices fill my cabinet. My other family never made it. I once walked a field covering their bodies, wild flowers and grasses. Hear the story of a line of children shot in the schoolyard. Hear Manik's hairbrush shop. What I can't wrap my head around is the story of the boy playing ball by the hole where they hid, how he ratted them out to a soldier. I try to imagine how that boy grew, to love his own boys only, playing hide and seek in the sun. And is that boy's boy a boy who now trains to turn a life lethal, to pull a trigger out of fear or rage or duty? I don't know, but I think it's the same boy, stammering history and now and here, boy who waves in the night to be seen. To the Israeli woman who worried her daughter's doll spoke Arabic. But it was not necessarily Arabic, more like a chortle of vowels begging for companionship, or maybe to be left alone. But she loves her doll and the button on his chest. But it was your twin flowing out his mouth into the valley and the sea that laps your spongy tongue. But it was necessarily Arabic. And though my grandfather arrived to Palestine from Aleppo, you said he would cry if I ever married an Arab. But isn't language how we come to love a home that baffles the scaffolds, making us we? But your children, look at them, build a fort, and inside it share an omelet. But you name them light and variation on light. But this room already forgot whose idea, whose hands, whose before, but the orange tree. But the string of sounds beads a rosary, pulling spheres across your skin. But our blood, inside its tribe, stains this place we petrify. I'm going to close with a poem called An Old Testament. Maybe it's a reimagining of the Old Testament. This was a poem that was written when my older daughter Noah was around 3 years old, and she was attending Congregation Beth Elohim preschool in Brooklyn. And she was coming home sharing all these Jewish stories that she was learning at school in highly inaccurate and also really just wildly beautiful ways. And there was one day that she sat on my lap and she basically told me this story, and I feel like I owe most of the language of this poem to Noah at age 3. An Old Testament. The Jews put God in jail for being in the night without them, and for believing the oil burned for 10 nights, not 8. And even though one Jew was mean, and another Jew was mean, and another, they helped God stand up in the dirt so that God could become 100 years old, then infinity years old, then back to 0. They remembered a wailing baby made from stories and starlight again and again. This was before the war turned them against their whiter neighbors, the browner ones too. Before they could see God spreading inside their enemies with impossible belonging. Truth is the earth where the window comes. The railroad rolled up the child's tongue. It was their own grief they remembered. Grief is the God, and the God filled the grief. Thank you. So we're gonna, what? Oh, are we good on time? Oh, I don't know. I don't have a sense of time, but I hope, I know it's a construct, but hopefully we're okay?
I don't know if you're okay, but it's 1:09.
Okay.
You're over at 1:25.
And what time is it?
1:09.
1:09. All right, we're good. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up to all of you to see if you have any questions. So the first question I'd like to ask each of you is, what does it mean to be a Jewish poet to you at this moment? Easy question.
Am I starting this?
You're sitting closest.
I know. Okay. I feel like at this moment is a complicated construct. Are we saying in this political moment because of what's happening in the United States? Are we saying in this political moment because of what's happening in the world? You know, I can just say, speaking for myself, you know, I always was resistant, probably because I'm an immigrant, right? I was resistant to this question that would get asked when I was a graduate student in periodic essays or classroom conversations of what is American about American poetry. And I would think, well, I'm writing this, and if you tell me what is American about this, then if I'm writing something different than it, somehow you are actually taking my nationality away from me. And I feel like there's something in that. I realized that my resistance to the question was actually very American, and in a way I think very Jewish, right? In that same sense. I mean, what's Jewish to me is this whole story of my life being born in a different country, being brought here explicitly because we were Jews, right? And we were very secular Jews who didn't really talk about it except when it mattered. And I think except when it mattered politically, except when it mattered externally, you know? And I feel like for me, there's this very increasing consciousness that it's not that there's something Jewish about my poetry, but that I'm inherently Jewish and Russian and American, you know, and a writer and a liberal and an academic and all of these things. And every poem I write, every word I write is completely, comes through that subjectivity. And I feel like the one thing I would add to that is that something about the tumult of the last year and a half just made me really committed to acknowledging my identity in its complexities and in its intersectionalities, to acknowledging my identity to myself, right? And I feel that it's a word I ran away from in some ways through a lot of my life, thinking of myself as, say, a Jewish poet, in a way that I really embrace it now.
Yeah, just going off that, I would say that I always considered myself a writer who was Jewish. And then probably after October 7th, I probably saw myself as a Jewish writer, or I feel like I was seen that way. And I don't know how comfortable I am with that, actually. And I understand a lot of it's probably in my head as well. That idea of identity, is it a reduction? Is it an amplification? What goes along with those words? The other thing I'd say is that being Jewish, I've always sort of felt a little bit like an outsider, a little outside of the center. And kind of, I think writers are also, see themselves outside of the center, outside of the main structure, what's going on. I'm sure there's many groups who feel outside of it. And I think to some ways that's an advantage, because to be outside of it is to give you that sort of cognitive, creative distance, and you can see it and maybe say something true about it with that distance. So I think there's a parallel there for me as well, that idea of being a step away in order to see something more clearly,
Yeah, I think I've always been wary of like any ultra nationalistic ideology, and I resist that. So like your point about just reducing an identity into this one particular thing. I see myself as a writer, a Jewish writer, that may be related to my ethnicity, my religion, my ways of thinking philosophically or otherwise, my interest in language and languages, and also being a woman as well. Judaism and my womanhood are intrinsic in my experience, yeah.
I think, it's interesting. I grew up as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors who never talked about what happened to them, and I found out about the Holocaust through literature, not through my family. And so literature was a place that I turned to for answers about certain things. And while I found answers, I also found ambiguity and complication and all of the things that get braided together, particularly in poetry, through having language butt up against different things in poems. I write Jewish poems, but I also write sex poems. I wrote poems about Walmart. I write poems about police. And Jewish poetry is sort of one thing I do, for me at least, since October 7th, I have not at all been writing Jewish poetry and have funneled my work in that arena more into activism and other things, because I feel like the rhetorical arena we've entered with language is unhelpful for me right now, to be able to, I haven't been able to find the skill yet to address the complications and things I want to address through poems. And it was really interesting to hear Michael read his new work, because Michael I usually think of as a lyric poet, and he's turning towards more complicated narrative. And I think a lot of people have undergone shifts in their work of in various ways that happen naturally as we age anyway, but also can happen through sociopolitical context. And for me, I'm still trying to find my poetry legs as a overtly Jewish poet in this moment. So I've been sneaking into writing essays instead.
So that kind of actually segues into my next question, which is for the poems that you've written that you feel like are Jewish poems, what makes them Jewish poems? Like, what is it about your work that you feel like is Jewish, in the sense of, are there Jewish sensibilities that animate your work? How would you name or locate the Jewishness of your work?
Well, I'll say for myself that it's fundamental. My understanding of Jewish identity is an identity of diaspora and displacement. And I feel like my poetry sometimes literally engages with diaspora and displacement in terms of greater political and historical forces, right? Being born in one country, coming to another. never feeling like you belong. But I think it permeates this other space of just of displacement and isolation as an individual in a family, in a community, always feeling like, well, I stand out from the space that I am in some way. And I think, and again, like, I don't think that I do that consciously. I think it's my sensibility. I think it's my way of looking at the world. But I think, I found, like, I was in a discussion of Jewish poetry recently, and I kept wanting to say there's something distinctly Jewish about the sensibility of what I'm reading, and it's very hard to pinpoint. Like, I feel like, and I think it's some of it is cultural, and obviously there's no monolithic Jewish culture, right? So it's a tricky thing to talk about, and I think it's probably different for each of us. But I think this whole, like, I grew up in a family where I was always told to ask questions and to argue, and I was encouraged to not seek consensus. Like it was more interesting if people are discussing something around a dinner table for someone to say something heterodox, and for that inquiry to be exciting. And I feel like my poetry, I'm like that as a professor. I think I'm like that as a writer, and I think there's something fundamental. Again, like, it's weird to say that is Jewish, right? But it's very much my subjectivity, and it's all over my work.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever set out trying to write a Jewish poem. I'm always interested in writing toward discovery, writing toward discomfort. Like, not write what you know, write what you want to know. And I think if I'm being honest to that journey, those things will come up. Just like people are like, oh, you write a lot about your kids. Is that something you try to do? I'm like, no, but my kids literally show up on my lap when I'm writing. So it would take a lot of work for me to extricate them from my work. And I think that's more of what it is. If I'm going to be honest when I write about my life and my reality and my world, my kids will be in those poems. And once in a while, being Jewish will be in those poems. And I don't think of myself as a political poet, but politics once in a while shows up in those poems, just because I need to be open and receptive toward the world, toward discovery, and toward things that, if I'm too comfortable in a poem and I'm like, oh, I've written this poem before, I know I need to take a risk. I know there's not enough at stake. And so sometimes that leads me towards writing about things that I'm unsure about, but I think that's the only way I know how to do it.
I think for me, one of my greatest loves about poetry is the music through the language. Like, I love prosody. I love scanning poems and thinking about the ways, like, vowels will change the sound or the amount of syllables in a line or the line break. I'm really obsessed with that. And I think my process towards that relates back to being in synagogue as a small child and listening to the cantor singing, and just how beautiful prayer is, and how that was like this major part of my coming of age and upbringing. And at various stages of my religiousness, thinking about how when I'd be in the Orthodox temple, the women in my family would be behind kind of this, wall or partition. So you wouldn't see who was making the music, but you'd hear it. And there's something ethereal about that and private about that that I think permeates my whole process and my love of the music of poetry.
And for me, at least personally, I think the Jewish impulse in poetry comes out of two really competing things, which is I was raised by like an immigrant and a refugee with the idea that everyone's out to kill you because that was their actual lived experience. And then I was Jewishly educated with the idea of tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. And I think to come to the page as a poet, you have to be open to the world. Like, you cannot be closed to the world. And fighting against that impulse of like, how do you reconcile those two things, to me is like right now the most Jewish thing in my work, even though there's a lot of obviously overtly Jewish tags. There's like actual Yiddish and like other things. And to me, that like figuring out how to reconcile those two impulses is a very Jewish thing.
I have another question, but I feel like time-wise, maybe it's good to open it up to all of you. So,
Yeah, three actually.
Okay, so we have time for a question. Does anyone have a question they want to ask? We'll also be available after for conversation as well. Yes. I see a hand in the back. Yeah.
Mm.
At this point, so I wrote a manuscript of futuristic setting. I heard you all kinds of looking for how can we express ourselves, bring unity. So I wrote this love story after seeing a lot of things. That love story begins in near future. And I'm thinking that using the elements of sci-fi or speculative world would be an interesting approach to the situation. What do you think about it?
I think that sounds great. Sci-fi and speculative work to reimagine.
Join us next year for New Jewish Futurism. New Jewish Futurism. Yeah, I feel like that's a whole other panel someone could do for next year.
Yeah.
Well, just to respond to that, I mean, this morning I went to the panel with over there in Gaza, and one of the writers who's Palestinian is a speculative fiction writer, and she was saying that that genre, especially with everything that's happening right now, is actually a very helpful way to get into this kind of material that's really difficult, but sometimes the reality of what's happening, like you kind of need to go into surrealism and speculative fiction to imagine that kind of a future. So.
Hila, do you remember the author's name?
It was Samia, I forgot her last name, S-A-M-I-A-H maybe?
So everyone look up the panel from this morning that Hila was at.
Since we're discussing things and it looks like it's comment time, I just wanted to say, just because the speculative thing came up, that moment where you brought up Superman in that poem, I was completely jealous of. Understanding Superman as a refugee in that, I mean, I was really very angry with you about that. and also the fact that you used his name, which is Carlie, which has always been like, how do I get the fact that this person has this name from another planet that sounds like you'd be able to identify him on this planet as someone who might indeed, as you just said, end up a refugee. Do you follow what I mean? I guess you know that because you put it in the poem. But I just want to recognize for everybody, big ups on like just finding the right figure at the right moment in a poem. Congratulations for that. I mean, I was just like, yeah, oh my God, Carlie, that was great, girl, you did that.
Thank you, Jericho. Do you want to wrap us up?
Oh yeah, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you. That was a great way to close. Thank you all for being here. And we'll be, I guess, at the book table and around for conversation. So
Once we unmic ourselves.
yeah.